These actions were not patriotic, and these people are not patriots.
Violence never wins. Freedom wins. And this is still the people's house.
Don't dare call them protesters. They were a riotous mob, insurrectionists, domestic terrorists.
We will not bow to lawlessness or intimidation.
To those who strove to deter us from our responsibility, you have failed.
Count me out. Enough is enough.
It is time for this president to resign, and if he won't, it is time for him to be removed.
We have seen so many images of the siege on Capitol Hill, the mob of Trump supporters descending on Washington in what started as a rally but ended as a deadly riot. Wednesday's events violated America's pillar of freedom during what was supposed to be one of the most sacred days in our nation's democracy. Instead, members of the House and the Senate were rushed to safe locations as crowds took over the entire building. Welcome to a special edition of The 10, where tonight we will be dedicating the entire show to what happened and how it happened, and maybe most importantly, how we the people can move forward. Beginning with a look at the day that will go down in history as one of America's darkest.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Joseph R. Biden, now the 46th president of the United States.
His first address to America, including a promise to persevere.
My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch, but thrived.
The vice president making history, breaking barriers and inspiring millions.
And after a historic day in Washington,
this new administration already hard at work tonight. The new policies already in place. The 10 on NECN starts right now.
Biden signed more than a dozen executive orders in the Oval Office, 15 to be exact, just hours after his arrival. They include an executive order on masks, requiring employees and contractors to wear face coverings in all federal buildings and on federal land. There's also a move to stop the Trump administration's decision to withdraw from the World Health Organization. The U.S. will also rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement. And on immigration, there's an order to stop construction of the southern border wall.
Just 22 years old, Amanda Gorman became the youngest poet at the swearing-in ceremony, and her words showed how the power of a poem can motivate millions. Now, aside from being a Harvard grad, Gorman has another strong connection to Boston. So here's NECN's Malcolm Johnson with her story.
And just this week, the House passed a bill to address an alarming problem here in America, the rising maternal mortality rate, and it's a problem that is disproportionately affecting women of color.
It's an issue not enough people are talking about. So tonight on The 10, we are devoting 10 minutes to this critically important subject. And the part that may be most alarming, the CDC says most of these deaths are preventable. In just a moment, you're going to hear from Tracy Skelly, a black woman from Massachusetts who knew the statistics. So she tried to control every scenario and still had complications that she says put her life at risk.
I can't breathe. I'm struggling to breathe. I will take your medication. I'm literally talking to her like I'm talking to you now. I will take this medication if you think that that's going to make you feel like you've checked off another box, but I'm telling you that something is wrong.
That's how she was talking to her nurses and doctors. We'll get to more on that in a moment. But if she sounds petrified, it's all because she knew all too well about these terrifying numbers. According to a 2018 study by the National Center for Health Statistics, black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy complications than white women. Here in Massachusetts, a place consistently ranked as a top city for health care, black women are twice as likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women and twice as likely to have severe problems. That's according to the Massachusetts COVID-19 Maternity Equity Coalition, a group newly formed to address this issue. And the coalition says the situation gets worse if someone is on Mass Health. That's the Medicaid program here in Massachusetts. The coalition says women on Mass Health are 3 times more likely to die or have severe complications than women who have private insurance.
There's more evidence of bias if you look at ER visits in general. So the National Institute of Health also studied racial discrepancies among visits to ERs in Massachusetts, Arizona, and Utah. So that 2008 study included more than 4 million visits, and they found the average wait time for African American and Asian patients was longer by about 13% at non-teaching hospitals. Hispanic patients experienced about 8% longer waits than their white counterparts.
And then you factor in the biggest problem, systemic racism, because even when insurance status, income, and age are all equal, African Americans still do not get equal care, according to the National Academy of Science. Racism itself impacts health, even in kids. A study from the American Academy of Pediatrics found racism is a core social determinant of health, and that prolonged effects of racism can turn into chronic stress on the body. And you might think, well, everyone has stress, but that stress can then lead to chronic disease. It can also lead to pregnancy complications, which affect both mom and baby, and may be a contributing factor to the racial disparities in the infant mortality rate. So literally, the stress of racism is deadly. And that's exactly what Tracy Skelly, the woman we introduced you to just a couple of minutes ago, says happened to her. She knew about the shocking statistics against women of color and worked really hard to try and mitigate those issues in her own care. But still, when the day came for her to give birth, she says she had a negative experience because of her race.
When I was pregnant with my daughter, I knew the stats. I knew that being a Black woman having a baby, that I was at increased risk for injury or death during or after my pregnancy.
It was a realization that Tracy Skelly of Boston tried to mitigate by doing research, joining a mom's group, and finding a Black OBGYN. But when she was hospitalized for sudden preeclampsia and hypertension at 34 weeks, her birth plan was thrown out.
Because I was admitted to the emergency department, you get the emergency room doctors.
A medical team she didn't know and who happened to be white.
The morning of October 6th, I started having trouble breathing. And I started complaining to the nurse that I was having trouble breathing. And in fact, in the middle of the night, I moved my bed all the way up so that I could sleep in a sitting up position, upright position. The nurse came in the morning. She said, "We'll tell your doctors about it when they start rounding, and we'll see what they say." When they did their rounds that morning, the emergency room doctor, she listened to my lungs. She said she didn't hear anything, and I was fine. And I was like, "But I'm really I'm really having trouble breathing."
She repeatedly complained at least 4 or 5 times until finally the doctor heard crackling in her lungs and ordered a chest X-ray.
The chest X-ray results came in, and I was retaining water on my lungs. So my lungs were filling with fluid, hence why I could not breathe.
Given the emergency, her daughter had to be delivered immediately. Tracy had a choice: be intubated or somehow survive a C-section with shallow breath.
I told her I don't want to be intubated. I just felt like I was going to die if I chose that path.
Thankfully, both baby Sophia and Tracy survived. But Tracy said her story shows how dangerous bias can be.
I think if I had been anyone else and felt any less indignant, then I could have ended up dead.
2 promising results in 2 different COVID-19 vaccine trials, all within a 2-week time period. 2020 trying so desperately to end on a high note. Cambridge-based Moderna saying its vaccine is nearly 95% effective.
Now, last week, Pfizer also announced its vaccine was 90% effective in preventing COVID-19. Progress in less than a year. It's truly a stunning timeline that experts say was expedited but not rushed. In Moderna's case, their phase 3 trial involved more than 30,000 participants in the United States, and that is a standard size for a phase 3 clinical trial, even under standard timelines. Now, out of the tens of thousands of people included in this trial, only 95 people contracted COVID-19, as we just heard, and 90 of those people were part of the placebo group. And of the 95 COVID-19 cases in that study, 15 were detected in adults over the age of 65, and 20 participants identifying as having a minority background. Now, Pfizer had even more people in their phase 3 study, 44,000 people to be exact, and they are reporting a 90% efficacy rate. Tonight on the 10, protecting your online privacy.
With so many apps, are we sharing information with the wrong people?
At the end of the day, you're giving out your data for free.
A comprehensive look at the hidden risks you sign up for.
How it can come back to harm you and how you can take back control.
Plus the concern about the future of arguably the most popular app during this quarantine. The 10 on NECN starts now.
Yeah, whatever social media platform you use, we all know there are some risks when it comes to privacy. Because TikTok is owned by a Chinese company, the U.S. government actually even more concerned about privacy there. They're concerned about a potential national security risk When it comes to TikTok, the president even threatened to ban TikTok in the U.S. unless a U.S. company purchases the app. And with only a couple days until this self-imposed deadline for a sale of TikTok, the president still hasn't signed off on any deal. Our Audrey Assistio breaks down the latest battle over TikTok.
Time is ticking for a TikTok deal that could save its status in the U.S. The social media giant already has millions of American users, but the fact that it's owned by a Chinese company, ByteDance, is a concern to President Trump. He's called it a security threat that could potentially spread disinformation and compromise Americans' personal data. He's threatened to ban it if it's not sold to an American company. And now a deal has been tentatively struck between ByteDance, American software company Oracle, and the U.S. Treasury, but it still needs approval from President Trump and the Chinese government.
It has to be 100% as far as national security is concerned. We need security, especially after what we've seen with respect to China and what's going on. We want security.
The latest version of the deal would create a U.S. version of TikTok that would be headquartered in the U.S., have an independent board approved by the U.S. government, and Oracle would have a minority stake in it, leaving ByteDance as the majority owner. I'm Audrey Assistio.
And while we're still waiting to see what will happen with TikTok, it got us thinking about all the social media apps out there that we use all the time and what kind of information they have on us. And here on The 10, we dedicate 10 minutes to the big story. And tonight, our focus is, what are we signing up for?
Tonight on The 10, we fear them.
And this is why.
It was glommed on. I could kind of see a cloud of red behind me.
To live with sharks, we have to have a better understanding of their behavior.
Because that's the key.
Tonight, the team's getting up close and personal with great whites, all to keep us safe. The all-new 10 starts right now. From the recent shark sightings to all the research that's being done in our area and the actions that are being done to prevent attacks. We could all learn a little bit from the man you're about to hear from. Last month marked 2 years since he was attacked by a great white shark off the coast of Massachusetts. Here's his survival story.
He only had a few precious seconds to react.
I mean, had to hit it, on the gill, the eye, or the snout.
2 summers ago, Bill Litton was swimming just off the coast of Truro in water only 8 to 10 feet deep when a great white shark sunk its teeth into his leg.
He stayed. He was glommed on, and he was trying to push me over. And so his head was way out of water because, and I think, fortunately, he was not the biggest of those sharks because he couldn't really handle me.
Litton punched the shark in its gills, and while that cut Litton's hand, it also broke the grip of the great white. But the 62-year-old New York neurologist wasn't out of harm's way just yet. He still had to swim to shore while bleeding profusely from his leg.
I could kind of see a cloud of red behind me. And it occurred to me that it's also the kind of thing that attracts sharks, so I didn't want to see more of them. But anyway, the other thing was the question of whether I can get to shore without losing consciousness.
After being put in a 2-day coma at the hospital and a half a dozen surgeries and lots of rehab, Litton is now nearly fully recovered.
Try to do my exercise every day and see if I can strengthen that leg back to normal or near normal. It's kind of missing one of the 4 muscles of the quad group, so it's weak.
And he's even been back in the ocean.
People are sometimes surprised. Are you willing to go back in the water? And I say, well, it's, low probability event. I'm certainly more conscious of it than I was, yes.
About 1 in several million odds of getting attacked by a shark. Still likely enough for Litton to check the shark tracking app before he takes a dip.
I certainly think about it, but there's not that much trepidation. But yeah, I wouldn't want to go back where I originally got attacked.
Litton isn't pushing for drastic changes to make attacks less likely, but he does think something should be done so everyone can coexist safely.
It's a balance. It's like you're saying, well, are we not part of nature? Yeah, we're kind of part of nature, so we should be balancing our organism against theirs and the seals and all the other creatures out there. Anyway, I have no strong feelings.
I want to thank you for spending part of your Wednesday night with us. I'm Tim Caputo.
And I'm Jackie Bruno. Have a great evening and stay safe out there.